I was thinking, like, just now talking about, I always draw that analogy with HTML being the skeleton or the frame of the house. And something just struck me as kind of funny. I was thinking of if HTML is the skeleton, then CSS is kind of the skin. And it seems like a weird way to say it, and it was weird in my head. But that is very much what it is, right? Is it going to be a lot of skin, or is it going to be what color is your skin, or what color are your walls, or what color you're stippling on the ceiling? That is CSS, right? It changes the visual appearance of the page, and arguably is probably one of the most important parts of having a good user experience. Certainly, it's not all CSS, but CSS is very important. And even though it does seem superficial, CSS is very serious. This is something that I regret not being able to spend more time on. But the truth is, I mean, if you're a designer, there's people who are so much better at this kind of stuff than I am. So usually I just do the bare bones stuff. But we'll try to stretch my knowledge today when we do that demonstration. So yeah, we're going to cover some CSS basics. A lot of this is terminology, just as with the elements, the tags, and the attributes. We'll talk about how to find a very specific item on your page, and you can use these selectors, define selectors to select certain elements on your page. And you can be very broad, or you can be very specific, focusing down even just to one element. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about properties. So this is kind of analogous to the HTML attribute. The properties and attributes, each in their own world, are kind of the same thing in these different worlds. So what you've seen so far and what we did last day, we ended up with this. It's already running. No, it's not. This is what we ended up with last day. So I'm trying to actually create an app before your eyes over the next 6 weeks, and something that is maybe useful. I think this would be definitely useful for someone like me, just given my hobbies. But you see this thing, we use nothing but HTML, and we could make it look a little better than this, but this is where CSS really steps in and why it's so important. So we're going to make it a lot more usable. But what you see here is just the default offered by the browser. Remember, just because you don't have any styles defined, there are still styles built into the browser, and this is what is being offered up. So as before, if you open this up in something a little more obscure like Opera, it might look a little different, but who's to say? Each browser treats ordinary HTML in its own way. So when we're talking about CSS, we're just really overriding these defaults. Browsers have their own styles, typically H1, H2 are different sizes, all the stuff that you've already come to see. CSS, we can change these. There's no rule that says H2 has to be smaller than H1, for example. When we define our CSS, now this is in a separate file apart from your HTML. So you guys have been working a lot on your index.html pages. Somehow we've got to say, okay, index.html. We have some styles we want to be applied here. We have to tell it where to find that file. We do this in the head, which is hopefully that's obvious given our previous discussion. We define this. We tell it the relationship to this document, and we just point it in the right direction, just like with an image. And like with an image, you'll notice there's no closing tag, just a little bit of HTML trivia. So we're talking about the basics. We're always talking about terminology. And that was that nice chart with the, in the HTML page. This is the CSS version of that. Now we talk about selectors, which identify what we want to change on our page. And then we can set individual properties. These properties can be anything. So here's our selector. Anything we define between these two curly braces is going to be applied to every single P tag on your web page. Now, I can't say offhand, but I suspect this is actually narrowing the margin. So by defining the margin property in the selector to 5 pixels, what the browser had before, I'm guessing, is probably quite a bit wider. And this is going to make it very narrow, 5 pixels. When you're done defining your CSS selector, you're changing those properties, you have to... When did my computer just stop? Go, computer. Oh, now we went too far. Here we are. Why can't I just jump to there? I have to keep clicking this thing. Okay, so here's our selectors, our properties and values. Very simple P tag definition. What element do we want to change? What do we want to change? And of course, just like with the attribute, you assign it a value. With the attribute, use an equal sign. With the value, use a colon. So these are very general tags. Anything we stick between, in this definition, is going to apply to every single anchor tag or a tag. Likewise with the P, likewise with the article tag. We want to get a little bit more specific. Maybe we have a navigation bar that we don't want to have, the typical blue font color and the underline that goes underneath it. And maybe we just want that right up at the top of the screen in our navigation bar. So if we define it like this, it's just kind of like nesting those boxes, right? CSS and HTML are like this, right? They're very closely tied. So a nav with an A is going to take all these properties. Likewise, an article with a P nested inside of it's going to take on these properties. And any P outside of that is going to get its own properties, right? So we're starting to narrow the focus, only applying styles to certain tags. Now, we don't see it very often, but say like you look at the P tag, and this is the go-to example in these slides. You haven't seen any attributes with the class. The class helps us narrow this even further. We can put this class attribute in everything, including a P tag, and have it unique. Well, not unique, but a unique class of styles to apply wherever you see this an element with this class. When we're talking about CSS, again, very special, we define it in our document by prefixing it with a period. So period means class, and this connects to over here. Notice there is no period here, right? We're still talking about two different technologies, even though they're, I don't know, is it symbiotic? Maybe not. I don't know. It's more, CSS is more like an enhancement to HTML, whereas I'd say HTML doesn't really lend itself to CSS. CSS probably doesn't really exist apart from an XML type language or any sort of markup language. So a couple of different classes. We want to get the most specific. We talk about an ID, right? So a class, for example, might be car, right? A class of vehicle. We got cars, we got trucks, we got buses. We might have a car class. The ID, by contrast, would be the license plate. There should only be one. Right? If there's two license plates that are the same, then we've got a problem. In our CSS, we point to the ID with the pound sign or the hashtag. I think the geometrical name for it is the octothorpe. Again, one of these things I never actually looked up. This my uncle told me that a long time ago. But octothorpe BIOS means that wherever you see this ID, apply the styles where this wherever what might be in place of this ... There should only be one. Now, what I must say to that end is that there's no rule that really enforces this. So it's up to you to do the right thing. For example, so which takes precedence? Now, just given knowing what I said, that the class is like the car, the ID is like the license plate, which one gets applied the styles first? Just a guess. ID. When you're talking, the more specific you get, the more precedence, the more priority that style takes. So ID would be the top. Class becomes the second one. Nested tags, that's the third. And then just tags by themselves, from the most specific to the most general. Okay, so what can you change? Everything. Everything. CSS is absolutely amazing, and I admire anyone who is good at it, because you find a good CSS person, I mean, they can make or break a product. Some of the most common ones, text and font properties. Very common thing to do with the A tag, for example. You get pretty tired of that bright blue color, right? So you probably change it to something a little more muted. You take off that little underline, right? You know, the very basic HTML link is going to be colored blue, and it's going to be underlined. We take that away. This is like practically the first thing you do if you're doing CSS. Change it, make it a heavier font weight. Font size, make it bigger, probably. Change the font style, on and on and on, right? We can't cover all of them. There are thousands. So if you're curious, you just have to ask yourself, okay, well, what do I want to do? And do I have the words to ask Google, right? So you can always look up CSS. You can look up all these different tags, and certain tags are going to just have certain properties. Like, for example, well, this is kind of a bad one. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, there's only certain things like an image would do, or an A tag would do, different apart from a P tag. So if you're curious what properties you can change, just look it up, right? We show you the most common ones. You want to do something really fancy, you got to do a little bit of research. So you've already seen this. This is in the Chrome Inspector. Just to refresh your memory, let's take a quick look. Here's the my recycling page as it stands. I can hit Shift-Control-J on my computer. The other way, of course, just in case you forgot, just find an element or a tag on your page and click Inspect. Every single browser has something like this. Maybe a part. I'm never actually sure if that's true. Like, you know, the Android browsers, I've never looked into it, but I suspect that they do. But you'll see what we saw on the slide right here. So if I select a tag somewhere up here, give myself a little bit more room. Let's find one of my boxes. Let's just do this header. It's kind of small, but that's okay. We look down here. Well, that's a bad example. It doesn't actually have any padding. But I want to show you like some little handy tricks. So I might be unhappy with you know, where this thing is aligned on the left-hand side. Maybe I want to spread it out a bit from the border or the edge of my page. I can just do a temporary change here and enter in some unit of measurement. So I'm going to use 2 EMs, and you see it just kind of shifts over. Let's try a different one. Let's come over to here. I guess I don't need to inspect that. I'm already inspecting. Let's do the same thing. Let's change the margin this time. It's going to kind of look the same, but I'm going to give it a lot more space. I'll say 5 EM, and there you go. So look, when I hover over top of it, it highlights the entire box, and you can see in that sort of brownish color area, that's where I made that change. I put in 5 EM. It was calculated to 80 pixels, and now I've got this extra size. Let's see how it changes if I do the padding. Let's do something a little bit. Let's do 5 EM as well, actually. Padding, margin. So it's kind of like how much styrofoam is in the box versus how much space there's around the box. You know, if you've ever worked in a warehouse, usually you put these things on pallets and they're all packed together, but you know, maybe something happened. Maybe you're just got 2 boxes on a pallet. That's the space outside the box, space inside the box. And you see the difference there. And of course, you can also change different things here. Say 1px. Whoops, that's a PZ. PX. I was hoping to, oh, well, I was hoping to put a border around it. Thing is, I have to color the border. And there is a border there, it's white, so you can't see it. Okay, so any questions about that? This is the inspector. This is a really handy tool just to see if you can, change some stuff around and get the visual look down correctly. And then encode this or define this in your CSS file. Because if I refresh, it was currently 80 and 80. Nothing changes on Cloud 9. It just goes back to nothing, right? You're just meddling with the code inside the browser itself. So just to be aware of. Very handy tool, though. So adjusting the borders and spacing. So this is BIOS. We give a margin 20 pixels. Okay, Miller kind of did this demonstration, but I will explain to what these do. So if the margin, this is the space outside the box, we're just giving a lot of space around so that nothing kind of overlaps it, makes it easier to read or whatever. The border, I don't usually use these, but this will draw a line between the margin and the padding. If you want to put a rounded edge, because by default it's always square, it always intersects at a right angle. You can, it'll still intersect at a right angle, but it'll just draw a nice little curve there with the border radius. Just some examples of the stuff you can do. And then padding. So this is the stuff inside the box, space from the border on either side. All right, so we're doing the Chrome Inspector, and there we go. All right, so before we do the demo, any questions about that? What is, now if we're talking about, here's a question for you. We're talking about HTML attributes. What is the parallel in CSS? What do we call those? Properties, yes. But thank you for both answers. The properties take values just like attributes take values. How we assign an attribute with an equal sign in HTML. What do we use in CSS? Colon. Exactly. All right. So far, so good. Okay, so I'm going to sit down here because it's hard to type standing up. And we're going to come over to Cloud 9. This is currently what we're working with. And you haven't seen me do this before, but the current trend, and this is probably going to be a trend with us for at least a few more years, is to always define or always make it look good on the phone first. Now, this one doesn't look good really on the phone or on the browser. So when I'm looking at this thing, it's like, okay, well, I know which one takes priority, so I'm just going to leave my phone emulator up here. Usually I pick the Nexus 5 because that was the phone I owned previous to the one I have now. Very good phone, very typical. I like to, just find the one that most people have. This used to have iPhone 4, which I think is still the most common. But iPhone 5 or iPhone 6, all very comparable, but they're all at the same time, they all have their own little idiosyncrasies. So this is a resource that you should, just maybe tailor make it to yourself. So whatever device you use, just try to make it look good on that device. So the closest one I've got is the Nexus S5. I want to do a couple of things. I think this map is a little bit impractical. I want to take up more space with these images. So when I whip out my phone, I can kind of get a better sense of what's been left behind, what might be available for salvage. So my intention is to take these maps, just open them up in a new tab. So then, you let Google do the whole thing and maybe just load it up on your Maps application or something. I think that's a lot more practical. So first thing I'm going to change are these maps. I'm just going to get rid of them. All right, sorry, I'm just going to copy and paste so that we have fewer errors. Whoops. Get rid of that README. So I'm getting rid of all of these iframes. Iframes are kind of goofy anyway. Really, the only thing I need are these coordinates. And if you got sharp eyes, you can kind of see what I'm after here. So I'm going to grab this guy. And I think that's the same one. Change it around and just take it out. Just like that. So A tags always have something. So it's either going to have to be an image or maybe some text. Right now, I'm just going to put some filler in there. So I'll say get directions like that. And I'll close it off with the A tag and be very mindful of my indentation. So we got to go slow. Let's just take a really quick look, see if that's okay. We'll do a few more sweeping changes. Try it again. So, okay, so here's the get directions. That's the link I just made. Can anyone tell me, or just make a guess, what do you suppose this does? What's this attribute?
Opens in a new tab.
Exactly. It opens it in a new tab. So if I click on this, fortunately, it doesn't open it up in a new cell phone tab, but here it is. Here's the map. Here's where I took that picture. So I'll make a couple more quick changes. Make it a little nicer. I'll copy this guy like that. Place the iframe and get the old coordinates. Gotta give myself some more space there. Here we are. So latitude. Oh, shoot. What on earth is happening here? All right, here we go. Here I sat down trying to make this easier on myself. All right, iframe, that's one. One last one, and we'll do a refresh and make sure everything looks okay still. And always mindful of indentation. Here's my coordinates. You'll learn a little bit more of these query strings in a few weeks. This is actually very important when you're creating applications like we do. All right, there we go. Let's get rid of that. So all those embedded maps are now disappeared. They've been replaced by links that will now open up in a new window, which is very convenient if you're looking for directions. Okay, so next thing, I'm going to create my CSS file. And what I like to do, and so this is going to be kind of what you're doing in your Finstagram app. This is just a very simplified directory structure. But when I'm doing these things and organizing them, I like to keep files of a similar kind in their own directory. So I'm going to call mine styles. And inside of there, I'm going to make a new file called, I always just do this by convention, app.css. And of course, the CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Just a blank page, nothing there yet. Still have to let this index.html page, I have to let it know that it exists. And that, well, more importantly, let the browser know where to find the styles. We do this with the link in the header. I say relationship is style sheet. And I tell it to find it in that directory. Can you tell me the directory path? What do I type between these two double quotes? My CSS file is in the styles directory, and it's called app.css. Styles/app.css, just like that. Nothing there yet, of course, but we can still find out if we did everything right just by looking at the console. So this is all part of debugging. I bring up my console, and if it can't find the page that I've linked, it's going to tell me right here. It's going to say 403, or I guess it's 404, error not found. So I refresh, Okay, it's looking good. I look at my elements, not in the header, but the head. Oh, something didn't happen. What happened here? Saved it. Am I not looking at the right one? Well, that's just weird.
I think you put the link in the header, not the head.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good eyes. Wrong spot, right? Whoa, big mistake. I got to put that up here. Correct my alignment. Thank you. Change that. Refresh. Okay, good. Console is empty. Wonderful. Okay, sir. On our way. Okay, so first thing I think I want to do, let's, a guy once told me he does it 1 hour by a half or something. He had some funny expression. And when he's working on a project or he's building a business, he does an hour on development, an hour on marketing, and half an hour to disengage. I'm not quite so disciplined, but I think this is generally good advice. So I tried to turn my attention to the user experience and to the marketing aspect. What I'm really missing here is just like a catchy splash page. So I'm going to define some more HTML and maybe put an image right up at the top. So here's my current header. I'm just going to go with my original. This is actually a web page I own, Recycle Freedom. I might actually deploy that there, just like that. And beneath that, I'm going to use this and put an image in the background. And this is where our CSS is going to start. So in our CSS file, I choose my selector. I just want to change everything inside the header. And the first thing I do is make an opening bracket and a closing bracket, which, Cloud9 is kind of nice enough to do that for you. Now in there, I can define a background image. Background image, like that. Now I've already picked one during my preparation, so I'm just going to copy and paste it here. And we'll see what happens. Okay, so this is a raccoon. That's going to be my mascot. I refresh. Hopefully up here, there's going to be a picture of a raccoon. Not quite. Something's kind of weird here. And I've also got a few weird things down here. So I've got to do some changing around. This always happens. So first thing, I think I'll take some of that low-hanging fruit here and fix these problems, because this isn't right. Any guesses as to why I'm seeing presumably a partial image of a raccoon? If I look at my HTML, it's a header. It should only be up here. Oh, but I also got it here. Oh, I see, right? This is what happens. Maybe what I should do instead is just use a class definition. So I'm going to abandon that initial instinct and change this around. I'm going to define a new class. And I'm only going to have one, but it's going to be a class. Well, actually, I'll make it an ID. That's a better idea because I only have one. So this is going to be my splash screen, my background. First thing everybody sees. Come back to here. How do I define an ID? Because that's too easy a question. ID equals splash, just like that. So you're going to be sitting there silently and it's like, is he serious? Too easy. ID splash. And now, since I've only defined it here, all of this stuff should disappear. All these weird stripes. Okay, that works. Good. Still can't see it though. Can't really see what's happening up there. So I'm going to increase the height. And I'm going to take about 30% of the screen. Well, I'll take exactly 30% of the screen, just like this. Should make it go a little bit bigger. Oh, there he is. Okay. He's getting better. He's rummaging through the garbage. as raccoons are wont to do. Looking good. But I don't like these, I don't like that it's repeating itself. We can fix that. We say background repeat, like that. So how do you learn all this stuff, right? You just got to find examples. There's no like one resource. There's so many different resources and you just can't find examples for everything, but someone's already done this. Someone has definitely shown you how to do this on Stack Overflow. It's up to you to apply it to your project. So looking better, but I really want to fill up this entire thing. Say background size. And Cloud9, as you can see, is actually very helpful. It's giving you lots of good suggestions. Size, I will say cover. Just like that. Looking good. Okay, but I still can't see, I set that recycle freedom thing. It's too dark. It is actually there. It's just, well, there it is. If you got really sharp eyes, you might be able to see it, but it's black. So I got to change this. But I really only want to apply it in one place. I want to apply it to this H1 header because I might want to stick some other stuff in there. So I'm going to make it really specific. We'll say splash H1. And I've already tried this out. I tried white. I tried different colors. I think the one that stood out the most was orange. Just like that. And there's lots of predefined colors here. So if you can think of it, it's probably already got, some sort of string equivalent, but you can also set the individual color concentrations. Oh, that didn't work. What happened? Did I just not save it? No, save. Oh, spash. You see that? Look at that. Misspelled it. So that's why you go slow. Otherwise, you're going to be banging your head against the wall trying to figure something out. Okay. All right. That's, it's not bad. I think I want to make it a little bit bigger and realign it. So, okay. Let's try font size. Font size. When I'm setting a size, I almost never do this. I never use this PX, and it's not to say that that's wrong. It's just that there's better units of measurements and ones that are more responsive. Because even on a cell phone, the screen is going to be bigger, tablet's going to be bigger. I like to use what's called the EM. And really, that's just M. And I learned this just a couple of weeks ago. M is the baseline. It's Times New Roman font at 12 pixels. So that font is going to be displayed different sizes depending on the screen size. So if I say 1 EM, that means 12 pixels, whatever this looks like on a 12 pixel Times New Roman font. If I say 1.75, it's going to make it that plus a little bit more, right? It's going to scale it up, make it just shy of 24 pixels. I guess what would that be, about 18 pixels. See how that changes. Oh, it made it much smaller. Okay, let's make it, oh, I know why. This is something that always gets me. As part of your metadata, now I don't want you to stress about this too much, but this is, I tried to make this as, widely appealing as possible depending on the device. And when you're doing this, you actually need to kind of set the scale of the device you're working on. You're probably not going to run into this, but just watch. This is going to make that font much bigger. There it is. Okay. Why? The default was less than 1. So this is like true 1, right? This is to scale, whereas before it was smaller by default. Okay, so a couple more changes. Let's place it over, let's place the splash greeting, recycle freedom, over top of the green garbage can. So I can move that around just by using the right attribute. So the distance from the right side of the screen I'm going to make that 1 EM. Oh, nothing happened. How about I change the top? Actually, no. I'm trying to lead you down a path here, and it's not really going to work that well. What we're dealing with here is different types of positions. So when you're laying these elements out and you're applying these styles, it's usually by default relative to the box that it's contained in and to any sibling boxes nested alongside of it. So what we need to do to fix this is what's called absolute positioning. I say position absolute, like that. The default, what it's sitting at right now, is relative, right? And you see Cloud9 is trying to help me out there. I want absolute. So disregard that previous box. Press refresh. Okay, so now it's on the right-hand side, just because I set that property. I want to place it down a little further over top of the green garbage can. I set the top, and I chose a good one, 3 EM already when I was preparing. That looks pretty good. The orange is a little dingy, but okay, that's I think that's fine for now. You know, this looks pretty good. What if I go into landscape mode? Remember, got to make sure that this thing looks good on a phone. That looks terrible, right? Again, it's super wide. It's just covering some of the content. You don't see the raccoon or anything. We got to fix this somehow. Let's put it back to where it was. Actually, let's go back here so we can just do a refresh. CSS allows us to determine the orientation of our device, the size of our device, and all sorts of different properties of our device. So now when someone takes our application, turns the phone, you know, clockwise or whatever, makes it into that landscape orientation, we can define special styles just for that condition. We use what are called media queries, prefixed with this @ sign. And then we say orientation landscape, just like that. And I think you might see a little bit of this in your Instagram. But of course, there's also portrait, you know, and you can also set the min width, the max width, and all that kind of stuff. We'll see a couple more examples like that. So what I want to do, though, is that when this user comes along, rotates the device, I want to give my raccoon a little bit more room. Currently, it's set at 30%. I think, you know, given the size of the image, maybe, well, something much bigger. Let's try it out. I can override the styles set previously. So I want to override splash specifically. And I'm going to make this 90%. So now it looks like this. It looks pretty good. Okay, so at least I can see my raccoon. I turn it around like this. Okay, yep, looking good. Whoops, I just opened up Compose. No, don't go there. Compass, rather. There we are. Let's turn it back here. Still some nice tweaking we can do. I think Recycle Freedom should be a little bit bigger, a little bit lower over top of the green compost container or whatever that thing is. Going to do the same thing. Going to apply it to this H1 in the event that the thing is rotated. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. Font size 2.5 Ms. Okay. Good. Not bad. Push it down the screen a little bit as well. Top 4.5 EM. Make sure it's right over top of the garbage can. There we go. Okay, it's looking good so far. One thing that's really bugging me, though, is this white space around here, right? That looks kind of hokey. So I think this is an easy question. What do I have to, what box do I have to change to remove this margin? Any guesses? If I do my inspector, So I'm contained here. Here's some of my articles. What one do I have to change, you think? It's not this one because that's the extent of my box. It's none of these ones. You can see where they all line up just by the highlights. What about the body? Yeah, there it is. Isn't that weird? 8 pixels on either side. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's that space I want to get rid of. Right? So whatever it is, I want to set margin to 0. Help me out here. What do I do? What's my selector? Body. That's my selector. It's the biggest one, right? I want to set that margin to 0. Just like that. I don't even need to put pixels. It doesn't matter what it is. Percentage, it's just 0. Nothing's there. Refresh. Okay, that looks better. The consequence of that, of course, was that now all my articles got pushed over as well, and that's looking kind of goofy. But I think, the splash page looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like in the big screen. Okay. Given more time, I think I'd probably make a much better high-res image of a raccoon. Maybe push this down a little bit. Actually, maybe we'll get time for that anyway. Or at least we'll adjust this a little bit. So we'll come back to this for now. Let's fix up our posts. So every time I go take a picture, it's going to add a new photo with a new map associated with it. So I'm going to change these guys now. Now, what I called these, I set a different class. So I got different articles. Sorry, what did I call them in my notes here? There we are. When I was doing this, I couldn't think of a good thing to call them. I mean, this is a pile of junk. It's in somebody's alley or it's in an abandoned lot, whatever it might be. But I do want a certain class of element. I called it cash, loot. I don't know. Could be anything, right? And each one of these things is going to have that same set of styles applied to it. So I've got 3 articles, each of type cash. Now this is a class definition, so it's going to be a little bit different. Remember, we saw this ID up here. What do I do for class? Period, exactly. Let's go all the way to the bottom. Cash. Really what's bothering me, this thing's butted right up against the edge. Okay, the first easy thing I can fix, I'm going to do the text alignment. So everything here, anything that falls under here is going to become centered. So that's going to fix at least the headers on these things. Okay, well, and I've fixed this thing as well. Kind of went a little bit askew. I think maybe I just need to refresh, hopefully. Oh, no, I see what it is. It's those links. So we're going to fix that as we go. Another thing I want to do is fix my images. I think I could use all this space a lot better, all this white space around the outside. So I'm going to define a special definition on my image, cache img, and I'm going to set that to whatever the size of the containing box. Remember that position, that absolute position versus the relative position? When I set the size, it's relative. It's relative to the box that it's contained inside of. So I'll say width 100%, not 100% of the screen, just 100% of this cache article. So it should at least make it a little bit wider. Okay, a little bit too wide. Just thought of something as well. I remember from last day, we actually set these widths manually. Let's get rid of those. Hopefully that'll fix something. It's still pretty big. Okay. Something's up here. Why is that so big? Okay, well let's add some other constraints. Going to add a little bit of padding around it just to hopefully spread this out. I'm actually not entirely sure why it's not being constrained to the size of the page, but I'm going to hope that this actually fixes itself a little bit. So we got our image, got our cache. Oh, it's because of the cache. That's what it is. This thing has to be constrained. So if I look at my layout here, and here's my cache, just click on one. It's just filling everything up. That's no good. So I need to shrink that down a little bit. I'm going to change the padding. I'm going to make it 1 EM. See if that makes a difference. Okay, so I did it on one side. Still too big. Hoping that fixes. Let's set the margins. This will also help center. This is getting more discouraging the further we go.
What do you have to do with the whole directions thing? You can't think that it's better?
No, I just figured it out. It's I still haven't actually set the width. So I'm gonna set this to 80% just to see what happens. Hopefully it'll look a little bit better. What? Sometimes the CSS gets cached. It's just making the page wider. That's weird. Sorry, you had a suggestion, it sounded like?
I didn't realize that I thought the get directions were over on the side still, but it looks like we resolved that.
Okay. We got our width. So it's definitely doing something. So if I take that width style off, it gets bigger and smaller. Maybe I just need to make the width smaller. Let's just try something really small just to see what happens. Let's make 40%. So it should be half of what I'm seeing there. Okay, that's still kind of weird. It's like it's still in landscape mode here, but it's still too wide.
Can you make it responsive?
That's what I'm doing, in fact. Yes. Yeah, that's when we talk about mobile first, we're talking about responsive. And as you can see, you're starting to see a little bit of that happening now, right? See how it changes like that? That's what we call when responsive.
Do you have to set a width for the body itself?
No, the body's always going to be everything you see, right? Anything you put in there is always going to be the full width of the screen. I love these suggestions, though. Let's just keep moving on, and hopefully something else is going to change here. Okay, maybe it's the positioning. Let's try position relative. That looks a little better anyway. Okay, yeah, let's try to switch that around. Oh, look at that. I'm embarrassed to say I'm not entirely sure. Like, this stuff is always is very hacky for me, right? If we're talking about CSS, this is definitely my weakest area. But this position relative is what fixed it. So this is relative to the containing or the surrounding environment. If I take this thing out, if you're curious, well, now of course it doesn't change back. That is absolutely hilarious. All right, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's keep going here. Let's set that to 80. When I was preparing today, I actually spent like all this time just trying to make it, look good to the best of my abilities here. But it's looking pretty good. All right. So a couple of things we can do here. I think almost always we always kind of mute the blacks. And again, I'm not a designer. It's just what kind of appeals to me and just what I see other people do. So I'm going to change this to a little bit of a grayer color. And I'm going to define a whole new H1 thing here for cache. And these are all my headers inside those boxes. those cache boxes. Another thing I know just from experience, if you do these like alternating patterns, I'm not entirely sure why. If we have any color theorists in the class, if you do these alternating patterns, come on, hashtag, you always get gray. Have you ever seen this notation before? Can someone explain to the class what these 6 digits do? It's hexadecimal.
Tells you what color you're looking for, although I'm not entirely sure.
Well, that's exactly it. So these are hexadecimal codes. So we're used to numbers 0 through 9. Hexadecimal has 16 digits, 0 through 9, and then A through F. F, of course, is the number 15. When you're looking at these hexadecimal codes, you're looking at red, these first 2 digits, and then green, and then blue. So in the varying concentrations, you can mix your colors together like this and pick whatever one you want. So I changed it to sort of a medium gray color, or at least I should have. Did I spell something wrong? Cache H1. Oh, that's why. These are H3s. Let's change them to H1s. I guess I could have left them as H3s as well.
The one H1 can get changed for metal shelving.
Metal shelving. Oh, yeah, thank you. Oh, I did the same thing. Whatever I did last time, I did it there too. All right, let's try that around. It's like that. So still doesn't look like it changed the color. And press board. Oh, I'm nesting it wrong. That's why. Or maybe not. Oh, that should work.
Your picture got huge too.
Yeah. Something changed. This is why you go slow, right? What I like to do when something really weird like this happens is I just unchange what I did and see if I can go back. What is that? Looks like I got some mangled syntax. That might actually be the problem. Okay. So at least it doesn't look really weird. No. Try that again. Cache H1. Let's try something, really, really different. We'll say, give me all the red. So the highest concentration of red, FF, 255 in decimal, 0000. No green, no blue. That's just all red. Hopefully, there we go. So the colors I notice are kind of muted. This would look very different on your, well, it looks very different on my screen, actually. Okay, so let's change that to gray. So we found our bearings. I don't know why this is, but if I do 1D, 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 do those repeating patterns, and it's always gray. Yeah, you still can't really see it. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's just the screen. Let's see if we can make it a little lighter. Say one, make it, maybe it needs to be a little way lighter. Say 4F, 4F, 4F. So it's almost going to be white. Very light color. Huh. It did change. It's kind of weird, right? Okay. All right. Let's run with it. I'd like to make the font a little bigger. So it's the exact same properties here. Say font size. And I'm going to use those relative measurements. What did I use? I used 1.5 EMs or M's. I don't know if that's bigger or smaller. It's almost like it's not changing here. Okay. Let's try something else. Let's change the font family. font family. I'm just going to do sans serif. So currently I've got some sort of a serif font, those little danglies on the ends of the lines. That should change, hopefully. Yeah, okay, so you definitely saw it there. I'm not sure why the color's not changing, but that's a little weird. But moving forward, that's looking pretty good. We're not going to get too much farther than here because we're certainly reaching the limits of my my design abilities here. One thing I do want to do, though, is just to make it look, like slick and professional. I'm going to use a little icon. And instead of having this get directions link, just have like a little Google icon that I can click on and maybe position it nicely right down here at the bottom of the page. So first thing I want to do, this might look a little bit weird to you. So I'm going to get rid of the get directions. I'm not even going to replace it with an image. I'm just going to replace it with an ordinary div. But I'm going to assign a class. And I'm going to call that class. Whoops. How did that happen? It's like that's like going to be the last thing I need help with there. Shoot. No one uses that. Class is going to be map-icon. And I'm going to use the same kind of idea I had on that splash page and just put the image in the background. Now I've already gone ahead and found an image. Let's make this. Find that right at the bottom of my CSS. So nothing you haven't seen before, period for the class, the map icon, and then a background image. At this point, we're going to have the same problem we had before, though. I'm going to refresh the page, and this is going to disappear, and there's probably going to be nothing. It knows about the image, but it's got 0 height and 0 width, so for all intents and purposes, it's invisible. You can actually come and look at it here. So here's my map icon. Or did I do this backwards? But you can see right down at the bottom, right? It gives you the position div.map-icon, and it has 0 height. So it actually does have width. It's just, you just still can't see it because it's 0 pixels high. Let's fix that because it looks like I've got some errors in my code. Huh. Did I miss something? Oh, can you guys spot it? What did I miss? It's on this line.
The closing line. No.
Exactly. If you're talking the talk, you'd say, "Oh, you missed the angle bracket on the opening tag." Fix that. And there's Cloud9 being extra helpful to me. Sometimes it's so helpful, I just wish it would stop. Same problem though. Still got nothing. Okay, so let's change the CSS. Let's fix that up a little bit. Now I don't need it to be full size. This is actually, pretty large for its purpose. It's about 150 pixels high, 150 pixels wide. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to manually set these pixels. Just having said, usually I don't do that. I usually use EMs. In this case, it's actually much more natural. So I've got 50 pixels wide and 50 pixels high. And you haven't actually seen the image, but it's a square. I think it's 175 by 175. So refresh. Okay. Same kind of problem. Remember how the raccoon was up in the top corner and we didn't quite see it? Any guesses? And I'm going to show you the old one. So this is where we defined our splash. What do you think I need to apply? What properties do I need to change from here?
Background size.
I think that's a good one, yeah. We'll just say cover. There's also a contain one. I don't think that really applies here, but cover might fix it. Oh, there it is. So there's my little Google sign. This is actually it's a ping, a PNG, which is nice because it has a transparent background and it gives you that kind of effect of floating. So this one was actually very carefully chosen because there's a little bit of a shadow underneath it. So let's move it over. Let's put it in a position over here. Got our background size. First thing I'm going to do is move it to the right, or move it from the right. This is kind of backwards intuitively. So this is the distance from the right-hand side of the container. Oh, didn't even do anything. I think I have something. Oh, this has to do with positioning. So it's relative to its sibling, I need absolute. You start monkeying with this stuff, you just get deeper and deeper. That's why you got to go slow. So what I'm getting after here is this position. Cache relative, remember how that just constrained everything properly? This isn't going to change until I say absolute, like that. There we go. Okay, so it's right-hand side. Now let me bump it up a little bit. So the position from the bottom now, we defined how far it is from the right. I'm going to pop it up 1.5 EMs. It's a little farther than I want. I suspect that I'm kind of missing something in my scripted steps here, but that's not bad. Let's push it down a little bit just to give it a little bit more depth. Let's try 1 first of all. We don't need to go crazy here. Okay, a little bit lower. I want to see how it looks if I do, say, 0.5, half an EM, half an M. I could do a 0.6, but there, 0.5. I don't know, I think that kind of looks kind of cool. That was what I was going for here. So now if I click on that, there's the location. Cool. And yeah, this thing actually works really great because then in my phone, at least, it automatically opens up. You can find directions from where you are. It's actually it's going to be a pretty handy app for, for my purposes, at least. So we've got all this kind of stuff. We've been very mindful about developing for mobile first. We know that it looks pretty good in portrait mode on your standard cell phone or whatever I decide is standard. Landscape looks also pretty good. Buttons are in position. Oh, still got to put these guys in. Hang on. Haven't done that yet. So I'm going to take that map icon div I just defined with that thing in the background and nest it inside of that anchor tag. So that way, when I click on it, I get sent to that page. Okay, one thing I haven't done, I haven't looked at what this thing looks like on, the big screen for a while. It's way too big, I would say. And, this is a matter of taste, but, if I'm sitting down here at my laptop and I'm scrounging for junk like this raccoon, I maybe want to put this picture, fit it to the page a little better. So I can use another media query, right? Because we've been doing all this stuff inside of a browser, and it's all, or we've assumed that the user is using a mobile phone. Let's account for that time that the user is going to use a desktop. Maybe he's wasting time at work, or I'm not sure what he's doing. Here we go. Min width. Okay, so now this is actually kind of threw me for a loop today. So it's kind of worth mentioning. It's really hard to find a happy medium. So notice the dimensions here. So I kind of left myself a little bit of room when I was doing some experimenting, but each device is going to have different dimensions. So here's the iPhone 6 in portrait mode. Actually, that's exactly the same. Let's try the iPad. So now the width is much bigger and the height, or at least the dimensions are much bigger. It's hard to find out, what is best. And I just picked a number. I said 750. Whoops. If the screen is at least 750 pixels, we're going to assume that it's a large tablet or maybe a desktop computer. And you can set as many of these as you want. So if you're working on some huge screen, it's like 1900 pixels, you could set a specific style just for that situation as well. So I want to change the cache around a bit. My whole goal here is just to fit this a bit better on the page. It's way too big. Nice big image, but it's hard to look at. So let's take this, define the cache. So this is each one of my articles. Make that width. The number I came up with was 55%. Looked pretty good. That's all right, I guess. I could probably even go smaller than that, but I think it's a little bit easier to look at. What else? How's my splash screen look like? Yeah, this is kind of, maybe this should be a little bit bigger. If we're looking at a big screen, let's, promote the site a little bit more. Say splash H1. And we'll say font size, make it much bigger, 3.5 M's.
It isn't a period for splash. Splash wasn't
Now looking at the code. Oh, you're right. Good eye. Thank you. So what did Jackie catch there? Can someone tell me?
ID versus class type.
Right. So I've got an ID defined here on the splash. What have I defined down here? Class. I need Octothorpe. There we are. Splash. Made the font size a lot bigger. And that actually aligns quite nicely. I also adjusted the position from the top. I set it to 5.5 M's. I just kind of want to see what this looks like because we're working in a different environment. So this, for distance from the top, let's see if it makes any difference at all. Oh, okay. Yeah, it just pushed it down a little bit. But I got my Brandon press board. I've got maps to their locations, and I've got kind of a pretty good concept for, a usable app. So that's our very early prototype. Now, are there any questions about that? There should be tons of questions, right? Like I barely know what I'm going on. I worked on it all morning. Yes.
The first media query you did, it was media and all.
Oh, yeah.
Purpose of and all.
That's a really good question. And I actually ran into that problem because I was thinking like some of the constraints. Let's just look. Let's say CSS media query. Let's just try and all. See what it says. Developer. This is kind of there's no really like there is a standard. I'd say probably Mozilla's the most professional quality. So this might be. I find this a little bit over my head sometimes. So you might try something a little bit easier or some example. Let's see if we can find an all. Okay. So what it says above, if I were on a screen device with a viewport width of 800 pixels, the media statement would return true because the first part interpreted as media all and would apply to my device and therefore return true, despite the fact that my screen device, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, I'm not entirely sure. Let's try taking it out. Let's see what happens. Might not even need it. I guarantee that I looked for an example of how to do the orientation and I copied and pasted it. So let's try that. Let's do it on the cell phone just to you might be able to see a little bit more. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's a bad one. That's on the iPad. Look at that. It pushed it all the way down there. Doesn't look like it changed anything. Let's put it back in and see if it fixes that problem. No. Okay. I think this might be worth fixing. Sorry, I can't answer your question. I'll look into it, though. That's a really good question. I really should know it. So, yeah. Any of you mentors know what that means on the media query? Shaking their heads. Look at these guys. Come on. All right. Let's fix this one, though. This kind of bugs me. Now, I pushed this one down 5.5 EMs. And a problem I'm noticing is that I'm not seeing my full raccoon here. That doesn't look too bad. I'm kind of unhappy that it's just doing that for the iPad. Let's rotate.
Instead of EM, can you use it a percentage so it's aligned to the image height?
Depends. Now you're talking about font size?
Like, because you know how your splash image is a percentage?
Yes.
30%. Can you use it the top? So instead of EM, use it as a percentage. So they're kind of almost the same unit of measure.
Let's try it. No, you're talking about the height of the background specifically, or you're talking?
Your cycle freedom keeps moving because I feel like your units are different. Like your image always stays 30%, but then your cycle freedom keeps moving up and down.
You're attacking the heart of the problem. But that is a problem that can be fixed by expanding the height of the container. I think that's what you're after here.
Yeah, so instead of EM,
Yeah.
which is 7 units.
In this case, well, no, it actually isn't. EM is just that baseline. 12 point times New Roman font, and that's going to be displayed differently on different devices. So using that as a baseline, then it just applies that whatever value is calculated. So it is responsive, at least anyway. Let's just bump this up a bit just for a second here, and we'll take another look. Let's do it 50% because currently I'd say that's just eyeballing it. I'd say that's 30% of the screen. Let's make it half. That looks a little bit better. I could probably fix my recycle freedom thing here. What did I have before? I had top 5.5 EMs. It's not the best, but it doesn't look bad. Oh, that looks bad though. We could do a portrait, or sorry, landscape. And we'll make this even bigger. I think it was 90% on the phone. Let's see what it looks like on the iPad. Doesn't seem like it did that. Did I do something wrong?
You have landscape there. Were you looking at it? Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought you were looking at it in portrait.
No, that's portrait. That's landscape. Let's just make sure I'm actually getting the notation right. Maybe this is where that all and thing comes in. Did I miss anything? I got media, all, and min width. Let's try that. I think I'm doing this wrong, actually. This might be something different. This might actually be this. No. Okay, I don't want to dwell on this too much because you guys got work to do and we're already 20 minutes over. Just as for review, though, I'm going to take this stuff out, leave it as it was, and I'm going to keep working on this as an ongoing project. So if I figure out how to fix this, you'll see it in a future class. Anyway, I'll be sure to bring that up. Let's take this out. Okay. It's a good thing I looked on the iPad, though, right? Oh, look at that. And all of a sudden it works. My raccoon looks nice and mangy there. All right. Looks good. What the heck did I change? Let's go back to iPad. Huh. Okay, well, it doesn't look ridiculous, at least. Looks pretty good. I don't know. Pretty pleased with myself. So I got to make sure at this point that I commit it. So I look at git status. Now I've already created a new repository. That should all be reviewed for you. So I'm currently pointing it at this place on GitHub. October week 2 day 1 demo. What am I looking at? Git status. Oh, I added a couple files, changed the index file. So let's make this a little bit bigger. So because this is always good to review, we'll say git add. Now everything's added. I've got my styles, my app.css. I say git commit get new layout with styles. There we are. Status, git push. And away it goes. And there it's for a resource for you. If you want to look at what I did or make your own application, that's fine too. Please follow along. If Instagram gives you a really good baseline for just some basic app functionality with the user sign up and all that kind of stuff. But there's always all sorts of different functionality that you can add, and we're going to be pushing that a little bit farther with this Recycle app. So, questions? All right. Then you have work. I will summarize this lecture, and the mentors are around to help you.